He's the toupee king. We sit down with a man who perfected Sinatra's hairpiece as he dishes the dirt on which Hollywood hunks are covering up bald spots.
Some of Hollywood's biggest legends were bald, and no one was allowed to know. Studios covered it up with wigs, lies, and contracts that threatened careers. Humphrey Bogart, John Wayne, and Cary Grant all relied on fake hair to stay marketable and maintain the illusion of perfection. Behind the camera were shocking and carefully hidden truths the film industry fought to bury for decades. What audiences saw was only part of the story. Now we are revealing the truth. These are 15 Golden Age icons who secretly wore wigs. Humphrey Bogart. Audiences never suspected the truth. Humphrey Bogart, Hollywood's tough-talking hero and the face of Casablanca and the Maltese Falcon, was quietly fighting something that didn't fit his image. Beneath the confident stare and slicked-back hair, he was losing it. By the time he filmed The Big Sleep, Bogart was already dependent on wigs to keep the illusion alive. In Hollywood, hair loss was not seen as natural. It was seen as weakness. Studios demanded youth and strength from their leading men, and Bogart's thinning hair became a constant source of pressure. He could not let the lights expose it. Each wig was made to match the persona the audience adored. The sharp, fearless man who never lost control. For Bogart, those wigs weren't vanity. They were survival. His case was unlike anyone else's. His hairpieces were made and maintained by Betty Thompson, a skilled wig maker who also became his mistress. She traveled with him to every set, carrying a small case filled with his custom wigs, including two he relied on most. One for formal roles, another for rougher, action scenes. Betty's job was to make sure the illusion never failed, no matter how close the camera got. To protect the secret, Bogart used misdirection. He openly introduced Betty as his mistress, letting people gossip about his affairs instead of asking questions about his hair. It worked. Few ever realized the truth. Betty Thompson wasn't just his lover. She was the keeper of his image, and the reason the world never saw his struggle beneath the charm. Behind the legend was a man who feared losing the career he built from nothing. Bogart's confidence on screen hid long hours of discomfort, fittings, and worry that a single misplaced strand could ruin him. When he died in 1957, Hollywood mourned the man who defined strength. What most never knew was that his power came from constant fear of being exposed. John Wayne. John Wayne's hair was gone by his 30s. By the time he was playing cowboys and soldiers, he was already wearing toupees full-time. The pieces were uncomfortable. They itched under the studio lights, trapped sweat, and had to be glued or pinned tight to his scalp. During long shooting days, he often complained about headaches from the adhesive and the constant pressure. He carried multiple spares. Makeup staff kept them in labeled boxes, and Wayne would switch them out when one became too damp or started slipping. Wind on outdoor sets was a nightmare. Crew members recalled him reaching up mid-scene to press the hair down before it shifted. On horseback, sweat and motion sometimes loosened the wig, and reshoots had to be ordered when the hair started to slide. Wayne hated anyone mentioning it. He refused to joke about it, and he threatened tabloids that tried to run stories. But on set, people noticed. Co-stars remembered the smell of the wig glue, especially during hot desert shoots. Others remembered how quick he was to leave the set once filming ended, so he could get the piece off his head and cool down. This wasn't vanity alone. Hollywood required it. Studios didn't want their biggest star seen balding. To stay on screen, Wayne had no choice but to endure the discomfort. Behind the commanding voice and slow walk was a man hiding a daily struggle with sweat, glue, and constant fear of exposure. Clark Gable. Clark Gable's struggle wasn't only with thinning hair. By his 30s, he was also battling serious dental problems. Years of neglect and infections had left him with chronic halitosis, and co-stars often complained about the smell on set. One actress said kissing scenes with Gable were like kissing a corpse. Behind the charm and confidence that audiences adored, he was humiliated by this constant reminder of something he couldn't fully control. The combination of hair loss and bad teeth hit him in ways most people never saw. On set, he was increasingly self-conscious. Cinematographers recalled him snapping at lighting crews when overhead angles revealed the thinning patches on his scalp. Between takes, he would retreat to mirrors, brushing and adjusting his toupee until it sat just right. Off-camera, he chewed mints constantly and carried sprays to mask his breath, though it rarely worked. These insecurities bled into his personal life. Though Gable had a reputation as a ladies' man, friends said he became more hesitant with women as he aged. Alcohol became a frequent crutch at parties, and he sometimes skipped social events if his wig wasn't in place or his breath was especially bad. For someone who had built his identity on confidence, the private shame gnawed at him. Professionally, the toll showed. By the 1950s, younger stars like Montgomery Clift and Marlon Brando were taking roles Gable once owned. Directors began casting him in gruffer parts, generals, older authority figures, rather than romantic leads. The man once hailed as the King of Hollywood now felt the crown slipping, and it wasn't just time doing it. It was the private battles with his body, the wigs and dental struggles he couldn't escape. Behind the image of rugged masculinity, Clark Gable was carrying daily discomfort and humiliation. It didn't just affect how he looked. It shaped how he worked, how he loved, and how he saw himself. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby wasn't just a singer. He was one of the first men in entertainment to realize that fame came with rules. On radio, no one cared what he looked like. His voice carried him to the top. But once cameras entered the picture, image became part of the job. That was when his biggest insecurity turned into a daily problem. Crosby began losing his hair in his early 30s. Under bright lights, his receding hairline became impossible to ignore. For a man who built his reputation on calm confidence, that loss felt like exposure. There were no surgeries or modern fixes. The solution was simple and uncomfortable: a toupee. Crosby never denied the toupee, but he never allowed anyone to bring it up. His control over his surroundings went far beyond music. On set and in public, he expected order, and his staff knew better than to ask questions. The hairpiece became part of that control. Assistants were told to have backups ready before every performance. No one touched it without permission. It wasn't about style, it was about power. Those who worked with him saw a man who hated surprises. He demanded that everything, from lighting to microphone placement, stay exactly as planned. The toupee was a small part of that system, a symbol of how tightly he managed his world. Losing control of it, even for a moment, would have felt like losing himself. For Crosby, the toupee wasn't about shame. It was part of his routine, something that helped him stay in control. It kept him looking the same, sounding the same, and feeling like the man everyone expected him to be. But that control came at a cost. Behind the calm smile was someone who never stopped trying to hold everything together. The hairpiece was only a small part of it. He couldn't let anything slip. Not his image, not his temper, not even his hair. Control gave him success, but it also left him alone, trapped by the standards he created. Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart's approach to wearing hairpieces was surprisingly down to earth. According to his longtime makeup artist, Charles Schramm, Stewart had one very specific request. His wigs should look like an ordinary man's hair. He didn't want them styled to perfection or overly polished. Instead, he preferred a slightly messy, natural appearance. For him, the point wasn't to hide behind flawless hair. It was to avoid looking like he was trying too hard. This attitude set Stewart apart from many Hollywood stars of his era. While others worried endlessly about maintaining a youthful look, Stewart treated his hairpieces as nothing more than professional tools. Director Henry Koster once explained that Stewart would put on his wig with the same practicality as putting on a costume or applying makeup. There was no vanity involved, no ego. To him, it was simply part of stepping into character. What makes Stewart's story even more unique is how his hairpieces changed with him over the years. Instead of insisting on a forever youthful style, Stewart allowed his wigs to naturally evolve. As he aged, the hairpieces began to thin and turn gray, mirroring the passage of time in his own life. This choice gave his on-screen presence more authenticity. He wasn't chasing an image of eternal youth, but rather presenting himself in a way that audiences could still connect with. In a world where many stars clung to illusions, Stewart's approach was refreshingly real. His wigs weren't about image, they were about the craft, about serving the story. And perhaps that's one reason why audiences trusted him. He seemed genuine, even in the smallest details. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra cared about control, but he cared even more about respect. Every room he entered, every stage he stood on, had to bend to his rhythm. He demanded silence when he sang and attention when he spoke. To most people, he looked untouchable. Sharp suits, perfect posture, and a voice that could stop time. But under that polished image was something that never stopped bothering him. By his 40s, Sinatra's hairline had started to fade, and he hated it. He took it personally. Hair loss wasn't just a change in appearance. To him, it was a loss of authority. The way he looked was part of how he kept control. The fedora, the tie, the cigarette, everything had to stay sharp. He didn't want anyone seeing weakness, so he fixed it the only way he could. He began wearing custom-made hairpieces that matched his every move. They were fitted so well that even under stage lights or camera flashes, no one could tell. People around him knew not to mention it. Sinatra had a quick temper, and when it came to his hair, the subject was off limits. Assistants who made jokes were gone by morning. Photographers were warned not to shoot from certain angles. The hairpiece wasn't a fashion choice. It was a line no one crossed. He treated it like he treated everything else in his life, with precision and control. Before every show, he checked it himself, adjusting it until it felt right. It wasn't about vanity. It was about power. He built his image on perfection, and that meant nothing could slip, not even one strand. The wig became part of the legend. When he walked on stage, the lights hit his face, the band started playing, and the audience saw confidence. No one saw the man underneath, the one terrified that time was catching up. The hairpiece helped him hide that fear. It gave him the strength to walk out and be Frank Sinatra again, even when he didn't feel like him anymore. In private, he was quieter about it. Friends said he hated mirrors and spent more time in silence before shows as he got older. The toupee wasn't just covering age, it was covering doubt. The fear that if people saw him as human, they would stop listening. And for Sinatra, being forgotten was worse than going bald. Yul Brynner. In 1951, Yul Brynner made a bold decision that would define his entire career. For his role in The King and I, he shaved his head completely, a choice that shocked audiences at the time. The Broadway production was a massive success, and when the story was later adapted into a film, Brynner kept the look. What started as a role-specific transformation became his lifelong trademark. From that point onward, Brynner remained bald, only using wigs when the role demanded it. But here's what many people forget. Before that radical change, wigs were part of Brynner's world. Early in his career, both on stage and in front of the camera, he often wore them. Brynner understood that appearance could shape an entire performance. Wigs allowed him to transform into historical figures or powerful rulers with precision. Each hairpiece was carefully designed, structured, sculpted, and intentional. When he shaved his head for the king and I, something unexpected happened. His bare scalp didn't weaken his presence, it magnified it. Suddenly, he appeared more commanding, modern, and unforgettable. Audiences thought it was daring, even rebellious, but it was also calculated. Brynner recognized the strength in simplicity. Yet, wigs never vanished from his craft. Whenever a role demanded period accuracy or a youthful portrayal, he wore them again. They weren't used to hide baldness, but to create an illusion that served the story. Brynner never allowed hair or the lack of it to define him. Instead, he turned both into tools of performance. In a world where many actors feared losing their image, Yul Brynner redefined it. Sean Connery. Sean Connery became the face of James Bond, embodying charm, danger, and a level of masculinity that redefined movie heroes. Yet beneath the tuxedo and flawless persona lay a truth few ever suspected. By the time he stepped into the role in Dr. No in 1962, Connery's hairline was already receding, a deeply personal struggle hidden from the world. For Connery, this was more than vanity. Coming from a working-class background in Scotland, he had fought his way into an industry obsessed with image. Losing his hair so young felt like a cruel betrayal, especially when his entire career depended on appearing invincible. The producers understood the stakes and insisted he wear a toupee, crafting an illusion so precise that audiences never questioned it. Every time he walked into a casino as Bond, the world saw power and perfection. But Connery himself knew it was a mask. The wigs became part of his daily reality, styled with imperfections to appear natural. They gave him the freedom to perform without distraction, but behind the camera, it was a reminder of what he had lost. For a man whose identity was built on strength and confidence, relying on a hairpiece created a quiet vulnerability that he carried in silence. What makes Connery's story so poignant is how long he lived with this contradiction. The world admired his effortless style, never realizing that much of it was constructed. He smiled, he seduced, he fought villains, all while knowing the image was not entirely his own. Later in life, Connery made peace with the truth, casting wigs aside and embracing authenticity. But during his golden years as Bond, the struggle was real. His story reminds us that behind the glamour of stardom, even the strongest heroes carried private battles. Battles that made them human after all. William Shatner. By the time William Shatner was stepping into Captain Kirk's boots in the early 1960s, whispers in Hollywood already circled around one uncomfortable truth. His hairline was retreating. Some claimed it began in his late 20s, while others pointed to the relentless stress of auditions and stage work that pushed it along faster. In an industry where the smallest flaw could end a career, Shatner faced a problem that no amount of charisma could mask. Television in that era was unforgiving. Continuity wasn't just preferred, it was law. A starship captain couldn't appear with a receding hairline in one scene and a fuller head in the next. The studios demanded consistency, and for Shatner, That meant resorting to an open secret in Hollywood: finely crafted hairpieces. But unlike others who treated wigs as just another accessory, Shatner reportedly wrestled with the idea. He was known for his confidence on screen, yet behind the cameras, he worried constantly about whether the toupee would hold under harsh lights, long takes, or sweaty action scenes. Some crew members recalled, always as rumors, that Shatner would step off set during breaks to adjust his uniform, as he jokingly called it. Others claimed he kept multiple versions of the toupee, one tailored for fight scenes, another designed for close-ups. Whether true or not, the whispers painted a picture of a man fighting to maintain not just an image, but an illusion of timeless authority. Fans, of course, made it worse. For decades, speculation about his hair became part of his legend. Was it real? Was it fake? Shatner never confirmed, never denied, and perhaps that was his cleverest move. By keeping the mystery alive, he turned a private insecurity into a public riddle. The silence itself became theater. One more role he played better than anyone expected. Burt Lancaster. Burt Lancaster always looked like the man who had it all. Broad shoulders, fiery eyes, and a presence that dominated every frame. But behind that heroic image was a quiet struggle he could never fully escape. Before Hollywood, Lancaster was a circus acrobat, soaring through the air with unmatched grace. That background gave him his trademark energy on screen. The leaps, the sword fights, the daring stunts that made audiences believe he was larger than life. But as the cameras loved him, time did not. By his late 30s, Lancaster's hair had thinned so much that it became impossible to ignore. In his early films like The Killers and Brute Force, the receding hairline was visible, almost vulnerable. And in an industry built on illusions, vulnerability wasn't allowed. When he stepped into Technicolor adventures like The Crimson Pirate, the pressure mounted. Heroes didn't look tired. They didn't look older, and they certainly didn't look bald. So Lancaster turned to wigs, not out of vanity, but out of necessity. Yet wigs brought their own torment. Performing his own stunts meant every flip, every punch, every dive risked exposing the secret glued to his scalp. Spirit gum and fine netting became his armor, holding the disguise in place as he hurled himself across sets. Stunt coordinator Lou Elias once explained how his team had to reinforce Lancaster's wigs so they wouldn't fly off mid-battle. Imagine the discomfort, sweat pouring down, makeup melting, the fear that one slip could shatter the illusion for millions. And yet, Lancaster never complained. He treated wigs like another prop, another obstacle to conquer. Director John Frankenheimer remembered how calmly he'd ask for adjustments, the way another actor might request a new sword. But that composure masked something deeper: the quiet humiliation of hiding a piece of himself just to keep Hollywood's cruel image machine satisfied. Even his closest friends knew. Kirk Douglas once teased him about having a performance enhancer on top, and Lancaster laughed it off, joking that purchased hair sometimes looked better than the real thing. But behind that humor was the truth every star feared: that the world only wanted them if they looked perfect. For Lancaster, the real performance wasn't just on screen. It was the daily act of holding together the man audiences thought they knew, while silently carrying the weight of the secret underneath. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy was often celebrated as the screen's most natural actor, a man who didn't seem to perform but simply existed on camera. Yet behind this effortless authenticity was an artificial secret: his reliance on wigs throughout much of his later career. By the early 1950s, when Tracy reached his early 50s, His hair had thinned considerably. MGM, determined to protect the image of one of its biggest stars, handled the transition with unusual care. Instead of giving Tracy a sudden, full head of hair, makeup artist William Tuttle designed wigs that looked like slightly thinning hair, matching the image of a middle-aged man. Over time, the wigs became fuller, but the changes were gradual enough that audiences never noticed. This approach reflected Tracy's own belief that acting should never call attention to itself. Tracy himself treated the wigs with the same practicality he applied to every tool of his craft. To him, they weren't about vanity, but about building a character for the screen. Off-camera, however, his relationship with Katharine Hepburn revealed a more human side to this carefully kept secret. Hepburn's niece, Katherine Houghton, recalled that Tracy often joked about his wig, calling it "this damn thing," but he felt it was necessary to maintain his leading man image. Around Hepburn, though, he was comfortable enough to remove it, showing the private vulnerability he rarely displayed elsewhere. By the time of his final film, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in 1967, his declining health made maintaining appearances more difficult. Director Stanley Kramer later admitted the wig was more noticeable, though audiences were far more moved by Tracy's powerful performance than his hairline. Robert Taylor. To the world, he seemed like the perfect leading man, effortlessly handsome, always polished, always ready for the close-up. But behind that flawless image was a man living under rules so strict he barely had control over his own appearance. His hair, maintained through carefully crafted wigs and hairpieces, was not just a matter of style. It was a contract. MGM, the powerhouse studio that created his stardom, decided early on that his image had to remain untouchable. Even before hair loss became noticeable, stylists were instructed to enhance his look with wigs. By his 30s, Taylor's contracts contained rigid clauses. He could not cut his hair, change a style, or alter his appearance without studio approval. Every detail was micromanaged. Budgets were signed off by Louis B. Mayer himself to ensure the finest wigs, while top stylist Sidney Gilleroff was tasked with protecting this asset. For the studio, his hair was property. For Taylor, it was a symbol of how little freedom he had in shaping his own identity. What made it even more emotional was how his image shifted not for himself, but for the world's expectations. Romantic waves in the 30s, rugged styles after World War II, his wigs became tools to match cultural moods. Yet he never had the luxury of choice. Unlike some stars who hid behind shame, Taylor accepted wigs as part of the business. But acceptance came at a cost. The man inside the perfect image often remained unseen, trapped by the very perfection that made him a star. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. grew up with impossible expectations. His father, Douglas Fairbanks Sr., was one of the biggest movie stars of the silent era, the original swashbuckling hero of films like The Mark of Zorro, Robin Hood, and The Thief of Baghdad. He helped define what a Hollywood leading man was supposed to look like: athletic, confident, and larger than life. For his son, that legacy was both a gift and a burden. People expected him to carry the same charm, the same smile, and the same strength. Living up to that image would shape every part of his life and career. For years, Douglas managed to live up to that image. But after serving in World War II, he came back changed. The stress, long hours, and age had taken their toll. By his early 30s, his hair had begun to fall out. When he returned to acting, the difference was clear. The young star everyone remembered now looked older and tired. For Fairbanks, this wasn't just about looks. It was about survival. He knew what the industry did to men who aged before their time. Roles disappeared, and so did careers. He had inherited his father's fame, but also the pressure to protect it. Losing his hair felt like losing control of the one thing that still tied him to that legacy. He turned to wigs, not for vanity, but necessity. They helped him keep his place in a business that valued appearance above skill. His stylist, Robert Schiffer, once said, Fairbanks treated his wigs the same way he treated his clothes. Simple, clean, and exact. He wanted them to blend in, not to stand out. They had to look natural, and they always did. Behind that precision was constant fear. Fairbanks lived with the worry that one wrong camera angle or a strong gust of wind could expose him. He didn't want embarrassment. He wanted respect. Unlike other actors who tried to look young forever, he let his wigs age with him. They thinned and grayed over time, matching what the audience expected to see. It wasn't an act of pride, it was an act of survival. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. spent his life trying to live up to a last name that belonged to someone else. The wigs were part of that struggle, a quiet way of holding on to the image the world demanded. He never complained, and he never joked about it. For him, it was just part of the job, another role he had to play to keep the illusion alive. Cesar Romero. Hollywood adored Cesar Romero for his elegance, his wit, and his magnetic presence. To the public, he was the hidden crown Latin lover, gliding through 6 decades of film and television with charm that seemed untouchable. But beneath the surface, Romero fought a quiet battle against an enemy that could strip away the very image his career depended on: hair loss. By his 30s, the cracks began to show. His once flawless appearance started to betray him, and in an industry built on perfection, even a receding hairline could be fatal. In the late 1930s and early 40s, Romero didn't hide it. His thinning hairline was visible on screen, a subtle reminder that even Hollywood idols weren't immune to time. But as the years passed, concealment became necessary, and wigs stepped in as his weapon of choice. Unlike others who tried to disguise hairpieces as natural, Romero's approach carried a strange defiance. His wigs didn't always blend seamlessly. In fact, they became increasingly noticeable. By the mid-1960s, when he played the Joker on the Batman TV series, the artificiality of the wig suited the exaggerated, almost grotesque tone of the character. The mask and the wig merged, turning Romero's personal struggle into a haunting part of his most iconic role. Makeup artist Ben Nye later recalled Romero's startling indifference. If a wig shifted during filming, Romero would adjust it casually in front of cast and crew. On sweltering days, he would remove it between takes, exposing the vulnerability beneath the performance without hesitation. It was as if he had made peace with the mask, blurring the line between the actor and the persona he wore. By the 70s and 80s, his wigs had taken on a life of their own. Under unforgiving studio lights and close-up television cameras, audiences could clearly see them, and yet they accepted it. Instead of undermining him, the wigs became part of Romero's theatrical identity, amplifying the drama he brought to every role. Hollywood demanded perfection, and Romero found his way of surviving it. His wigs weren't just costumes, they were shields, tools of defiance against a system that punished imperfection. For Romero, the performance never stopped, even when the cameras weren't rolling. We hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more amazing stories.